Should we pull a tarot card for kicks and giggles?
Yeah.
Oh.
Woo-hoo.
Do you have a deck or do you want me to get mine?
Of course I have a deck. How many decks do I have?
I don't know.
We're in a space that is a living tarot. I'm making a tarot collage on the wall, made up of found objects and natural collected, materials and imagery and all this stuff. It's about Black fungibility. So it's the High Empress or the Empress.
Cool.
Amazing. All right, I'm gonna let everybody in.
Make it happen.
Thank you. You want to pull it? You want to pull the card, Ari?
How do I do it? Yeah, we'll figure out how to do that.
Cards. I have cards. This is a cool deck.
All right.
Oh,
Good afternoon, everybody. Elena or Morgan and Jay, is it okay to dive in right now? I know it's a few minutes after 4. My name is Ari. I'm really happy to see you all. Yeah, we're gonna go for it. I'm gonna try to get my face off the screen. Hey everyone again, welcome to JVP New York City's latest edition of Conversations with Movement Elders. I'm really happy to be here with you today. My name is Ari Wohlfeiler, and I'm gonna be interviewing, chatting with, hanging out with the one and only Kai Lumumba Barrow. Kai, can we make sure you're the big screen? And we're just gonna dive.
Just checking out the room.
Yeah, let's take a second. We're gonna ease into this in a couple of different ways. So the first is actually something that we were talking about just a second ago, and then I guess maybe Elena has been teaching some of you this, which is to cover your picture on Zoom. And then Kai, you were talking about maybe sitting a little bit differently in front of the computer than you normally do on Zoom. So I want to invite everybody just to take a second maybe and adjust how they normally interact in this, COVID era, especially this era of Zoom. Maybe we can try to be slightly physically different with each other and how we are together, whatever that means right now. So I'm gonna offer a small introduction for you, Kai, and then we'll just be off to the races. I first met Kai in 2001. I didn't actually meet you in this moment, but the first time I saw you, you were emceeing the opening ceremony for the Critical Resistance East Conference, which was one of the founding gatherings of Critical Resistance, which is a prison abolitionist organization, which is, part of the politics we'll definitely be talking about today and trying to figure out where we go with. And, I think the main thing I feel like I've gotten from working with Kai and listening to and observing and just being around Kai over the last 20 years is how to ask why, how to really respect the power of analysis, how to really fully commit to critical thinking as something that I expect of myself and I expect of others. And then that actually is a way of really trying to get into a respectful, non-oppressive mode with comrades or potential comrades, right? Is to actually expect that we will both bring our critical thinking skills to the table. So that's my, that's sort of, I guess, in some ways my political or more personal introduction to you. And on a little bit more of a formal level, Kai's a queer, Black feminist, visual and performance artist, longtime organizer, and I think we'll talk about this too a little bit, but I think today you're doing a lot of thinking about what the identity of artist and the identity of organizer means and how you can take one up and put one down and what those make possible. Kai lives and works in New Orleans right now, but has also lived in a bunch of different places in these United States. Her artistic work right now and her political work more generally is concerned with notions of Black nomadism, surrealism. We definitely want to talk, I think, a lot about finding absurdity. And you were talking about particularly Black surrealist perspectives in praxis in this moment, and radical imagination. So again, that question of how do we ask why, and also what do we ask for? I think that's one of the things you've really taught me, is to really be thoughtful about how we make our demands, and how we think about why we're making the demands we're making, and what it does for us and what it does for the world. And yeah, she in 2010, Kai launched Gallery of the Streets, which is a broad network of artists, activists, scholars, and organizers. And they're doing sort of work at the nexus of public art, political education, community engagement, and movement building. And I think trying to both knit together and reinvent all of those categories. And that's also the project that we're going to be hearing a little bit more about, and also supporting later in our hangout or conversation today. And you can find out more about all of that at kailbarrow.com. Maybe somebody could put that in the chat, and galleryofthestreets.org. Yeah, so actually, oh, sorry, I'm gonna try to be louder. Can I get sorry, I feel like I'm yelling, but now maybe with my mic here. Is this good for people? Great. All right. So Kai, you actually brought some music to lead us in. So maybe I'm hoping the tech is gonna work out, but can you just leap in and start introducing what we're gonna use auditorily to settle in?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I see Laura and I see Una. Who knows about Romper Room? I see Morgan, and I see Elena. It's really cool because it's really great to see faces that I know. Yeah, I have been listening a lot to the poet, to the Black feminist poet, artist, surrealist Jane Cortez, Jayne, last name Cortez, Cortez. And I think maybe hopefully, since I like to drop references, maybe as a point of afterwards, we can include like references. This is part of our, we've been doing writing a libretto. And so we've included some of these references within the libretto, and I would love to make that public. It's a work in progress, but as I talk about stuff, kind of doing a Fred Moten approach, I want to, make sure that people have this music. Yes, that's the way you spell her name. Gina, yes. I want to make sure that people have access to the material, because it's not like, specialized, right? So Jane Cortez is a poet, was a poet. She died maybe 2012, something like that. But I feel like she's really under acknowledged, and I think she does a lot of work around the idea of mapping, and particularly mapping Black diaspora, right? And so in this period, I've been really listening to this album called Celebrations and Solitudes. And as a surrealist, I would encourage you to listen to her work, because she's not a neat and easy to listen to artist. It's not pop. It's not easy. It's very abrupt, and it is, the imagery that she paints is also highly crass, right, without cursing. So, she has a line, New York City, break wind with me, or something like that. I can't even. But so this one particular piece, and I really want to do more with her. Robin D.G. Kelly talks about her a lot too. But one of these pieces that I've been listening to, when you download, Google this album, is called Festivals and Funerals. And the other, and it's very, very Jane Cortez. There are no tears, we have no friends, that is the word. Right? And then she goes on, and you're just in this space. And this piece I'm working on, I've been working it to this idea of festivals and funerals. But the piece I want to play now, Jay, whenever you're ready, is called Homicide. And I want to enter into our conversation, mostly think about this idea of Black absurdity with this entry point. You ready? Can you do it? Can you drop it? Drop it.
He died from a bullet wound in the back, fired by a plainclothes policeman in Queens, New York. Don't forget, 10-year-old Clifford Glover.
I just want that. And that's the motion that she constructs. She'll go from very, very direct to very, very abstract. And you're managing all of that. And to me, that is the experience of Black absurdity, right? Dealing with a very direct assault along with all the heterotropias that are underneath that, right? And so as we're talking about this moment, I've been really like, wow, we have been, the group that I'm working with, artists and activists, have been talking about this question of anti-Black violence since, I've been doing it for a really long time, but as a group, we've been doing it since 2016 with this idea, this project that we're doing, a visual art opera. And our idea was, given what was happening in the broader United States public sphere, that we should run a candidate for president. In fact, we should run several candidates for president. So we're running 10 of us for president, and under the guise of the Basement Party, and with the slogan hashtag Let's Get Stupid 2020. And so because our storyline follows a revolutionary, prisoner number 25, who is looking for ways to remove themselves and their communities from the oppressions of anti-Black violence. And in that, they go into different motives and motifs and environments. And in this moment, because we saw what was happening on the political stage, we said, oh, it's a political circus. So prisoner number 25 will run away to the circus. And so then the circus actually got really real. So it's like even more absurd than, sometimes it just writes itself, Ari. So now, since Corona, we're like, whoa, now what, right? Now what? But we have begun to talk about this idea of Black governance, this idea of political representation, the question of what does it mean to choose our gatekeepers, right? What does it mean to choose our gatekeepers? So prisoner number 25, which, spoiler alert, is all of us, is inside, and the empire suggests that the way to move forward is to elect their keepers. You can choose who will guard you. And prisoner number 25, the collective, said, well, that's ridiculous. But somehow that seems to be working. So let's poll our community and find out what exactly does it mean when we choose our gatekeepers. And so we wanted to have this conversation around Black political representation in a moment of chatter. And so we've been building on this project, and now, it's just this question of a Black counterpublics, all these things are really in motion. And so, absurdity. That's my intro. Hi, everybody. Should I mute?
Amazing. I think where I want to go with that, actually, sort of to try to maybe like just dispense with what I feel like is like the most expected question. I'm going to try to maybe do it in a in a way that leads back into the project and to that is a little bit more embracing of the absurd, right? Because I think, and again, I think I didn't quite do this justice maybe in my intro, but for those of us on the call, organizations that have led us to this moment in really dramatic ways are organizations that KAI has helped build, right? And like, if you I think want to take, right, there's in some ways, I think, a very incredibly important, right? And also maybe I think what you would say, KAI, is maybe not quite enough, right? Demand right now that we listen to people who've been doing abolition for a long time, right? That we listen to queer Black women who've been doing abolition for a long time. And like, you're one of those people, right? But in preparing this conversation with you over the last week and seeing so much change, even, just in that last week, I wouldn't even say I've sensed. I mean, you've been resistant to that question, right? And to being that person and to addressing the sort of, I think the bigger question of like, what do we do, right? I think that's really the big question right now that people are bringing, right? Not wanting to just sort of be the movement elder in the room who's being listened to. So one way you said it to me, and this is how I'll ask the question, is having done abolitionist organizing for many a decade, even at this point, right? How does it feel to be right? How does it feel over the last couple of weeks to see your shit out there in front, in a new way?
That's so funny. Somebody called me and asked me that question too. And I was like, the same way it felt yesterday. I mean, what? So what? Like, no shit, Sherlock. Police kill us. Like, I don't think that's a big reach, right? I don't really think that's a big reach. So it doesn't bring me any, because I'm not a capitalist, I'm not getting, I don't benefit necessarily from feeling right. And and I know you're playing with me because you just threw me a softball. But the question around like abundance, right? So, there's a few things that are happening right now, which is maybe, Elena says my internet connection is unstable, or Jay, okay, it's probably stable now. Maybe one of the ways to think about this is if it is easily consumable, then it's not abolition. And that sounds super simplistic and reductionist. But it also flips the question to us, that is, what makes us think, what are we doing after 500, depending on your calendar, or 400 years of organizing that is so different from what our ancestors did, that a shift of the major systems that hold these systems of oppression together. What would make us think that shift would happen after like maybe a week of people yelling? Like not even actually impacting the stock exchange or anything. So there's a point in the rhetoric where I think we pull back and say, yes, let us take a moment and applaud the work that we do and recognize that this work has moved us a needle or a notch. But this is not abolitionist work. And to think that this protracted struggle can result in us maintaining overarching systems, but shift like the leaves of those systems is I think, politically naive. And I think our organizations have to do a job of that kind of deconstruction with each other in a way that's principled and honest and not demoralizing, but also in a way that's really honest. So that also when you're talking about Clifford Glover or whomever, some John Burge some 30, 40 years ago in terms of our organizing to get Laura out of prison. So when you're in that cycle of that is your work and that's a continuum piece of work, then you need to have the kind of long view that allows you to look at these moments as notches and part of a larger map that we're making that is moving us toward abolition. I think we are right. There's no amount of data that will tell me that what we believe and how we are envisioning the world is not right. So I don't need the state to justify, or capitalism to justify a politic that I think is integral to shaping a new society or new societies. I don't, because why would it share my interest? Like Malcolm said, if it gets to the point where the society is applauding me and giving me medals, then the work that I am doing has failed, right? So we have to be critical around how we take these ideas of victory, right? And what the other piece I want to play is that Amilcar Cabral piece. Amilcar Cabral talks about, you know, everybody does this quote, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. These are not easy victories. These are moments. Yes, we reward ourselves and enjoy and laughter. I am keeping a book of stupid that looks at like Lyft telling me Black Lives Matter and Amazon, and, you know, that looks at Nancy Pelosi and Kente Cloth and police taking knees, which are yoga terms, and talking about let's change the protest into parades. Like the level of stupid that is going on right now is worth us archiving, so that as we're doing this kind of political education, we can make some kind of clarifications around how, when the shift will take us outside of this larger vision of radical transformation, because it's gonna, I believe, not to, you know, not to like, spoiler alert, but I mean, we haven't done the work yet. We haven't done the work yet.
I mean,
we're doing the work.
Yeah.
But we haven't done the work yet to think that we're going to move a system in Minneapolis or anywhere else that's invested in anti-Black violence to a non-anti-Black violence stance, because the police are defunded through a policy group of Democrats or Green Party candidates.
I guess, yeah. I guess I want to ask you to keep going in sort of two different ways with that, though. And I think one is, again, something you said actually to me this morning, right? You said, you know, are unrealistic expectations necessary to keep going, right? Like, do we have to pretend like we just won something, or the, you know, organizers in Minneapolis just won something to what? To get up, to keep in the streets, to raise money, to what, right? To recruit members, to bring new people into the conversation, right? Do we have to be unrealistic? Do we have to pretend maybe, right? And like, both, I think I wanted you to deal with that sort of as like, maybe I'll just ask this question. Like, on the one hand, I hear a criticism in that, you know, and like, we should be a little bit more clear about what, you know, go ahead. But on the other hand, like, what are some healthy ways maybe, or aspects of that, right? Why be realistic? Why assume it's going to go down like it went before? You know, like, is there maybe anything really helpful in that kind of,
dreaming?
Yeah. When does it become dreaming?
Sure. I mean, I think if it transforms into the question, so there's a couple things, right? This question of, are we talking about hearts and minds? Are we talking about power? Are we talking about both and where are we measuring our effectiveness, right? So if we're measuring our effectiveness based upon scale, then we have to be critical about that, whether those strategies are actually effective. Because though we may have more organizations, do we have more people who are actually hearts and minds invested in critical disruption of these systems? So I would say no, we do not. But we do have organizations that are more positioned. We have more organizations, right? So that's one thing. And with that, right, that then would assume that there are more opportunities for interruption, interrogation, experimentation, all the things that have landed us to where we are right now, right? So there is this need for this work to continue. I mean, I don't want to pose these as either or. It's not a dichotomy. I think at a certain point, the question becomes, why am I doing this work? Am I doing this work because it's trends, because I want an immediate response? Do I want an immediate outcome, i.e. an immediate conditional change? Am I doing this work because I want to see a long-term value system and methodology for thinking? Am I doing this work because it gives me social capital? Why am I doing this work? And what can I, as an individual, and what can my organizations within this movement hope to achieve from doing this work? I maintain that this work is a continuum, and so that one of the most important things that we can be doing is engaging in the questions of hearts and minds and radicalizing how we think about the positions that we're operating in, and then how we how we balance that vision with our own particular desires and the desires of our communities, right? And so like this kind of tug, am I getting too abstract?
No, I think you're great. I mean, I think I'm curious what your answer to that question is when you are asking yourself, why am I doing this? Whatever it is these days, right?
So I started organizing in 3rd grade, right? Yes. And for all people who have little kids right now, pay attention. You too can have baby Kai. But just kidding. I started organizing in 3rd grade because there was a cultural zeitgeist that helped shape, including at home, that helped shape how I saw the world, right? And so I called for a walkout against the Vietnam War in the 3rd grade, and off we did, right? Off we go. Boom, boom, boom. This work was rewarded to some degree, at least at home, right? And so not at school. And so my parents helped me make a critical assessment as to how this idea of revolution was received from home and the communities that I lived in and was around, which were other movement communities, and the state, which was school, the public education system. I could start to see like how those institutions were in contention, yeah? And therefore, the parents gave me power to continue to push against them and demanded, in fact, that I be critical of them, right? So that began like this pathway. That's the mind piece. The heart piece was, I saw people who came to Chicago for the Democratic Convention beat up by the police. I understood that. I saw my friends who were staying at my family's homes who had come to town for the action, coming back bleeding, etc. I also, as a kid, was in bed asleep when the Chicago police did a shootout on our building searching for Dave Dillinger. So I was terrorized by the police on multiple levels at the age of, 8, 9, 10, right? So that period, I also then had a whole community that was not only outraged, but also engaged. So they were in meetings all the time, and they had meetings set up for us kids. So we were doing political education, right? We had Saturday schools, we had survival schools. You would walk down the street and you had a fro and people would say, Black power, little sister, and you would feel beautiful. You could participate in the making of murals, and you would also help make carrot juice for the elders. So this whole kind of shifting of a broader society that wasn't really happening with my grandmama in them. That was happening in the movement community of which I was seated, right? And so this kind of going into our communities, honoring those communities for what they produce in a long-term, protracted strategy is, I think, the work that I'm asking us to like also spend much time around, because we seem to be doing much more external work, right? As demanding of the state. And that's not, you know, an either or, but when we're talking about our resources, such as our dollars, such as our time, and such as our values for what makes success and what is not, those kind of soft kind of spaces are not actually looked at within the context of our larger you know, the continuum of our movement, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. It's this kind of abundance approach that doesn't allow you, it's intersectional. It doesn't allow you just to focus on the outside, but also to, you know, to center the inside. Does that make sense? And I think that gives you hope, because that gives you something to do.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not necessarily like you're getting some kind of win-lose capitalist idea, but actually the process of creating that is the so-called reward. That's what we're making. We're making revolution. You see what I'm saying? We're making that.
I mean, it's so, I want to pick out actually that last part you said about process, because I don't know if any, and just get your, I guess, reaction to this, Kay. I mean, one of the things I was following about the decision, or the, right, it's not a decision yet, it's an announcement by a group of city councilors in Minneapolis, right, to dismantle the police department, right? And one of the things that I've at least heard them say, right, is that they're going to enter into this year-long process, right? And I heard some city councilor on Democracy Now! Or something the other day saying, like, we want to talk to every single resident of Minneapolis, right? And I think a part of me was like, well, see, interesting. You seem unconvinced, which I think I understand on some level. I think I also felt like, in some ways, that's a product of a sort of like, whether you want to call it a process-based or a relational mode, like seeping up, right? That like there's something, and maybe it's just co-optation, right? Happening there, where they're like, we're not going to just, you know, one of the things they're saying very clearly is, we don't know what it's going to look like, right? Which again, I think on some level, that's the most friggin' awesome thing to hear an elected official admit, right? And to say, I'm willing to act, even though I don't know what it's going to look like, is like, that is sort of the fundamentals, I think, of meeting an abolitionist demand, right? Is to say, like, anything's better than this, right? So yeah, I just want to hear some more about that, and about sort of like, what is it, how do, you know, you're saying it, it takes a sort of a broad set of things. So what is the room for, how would you see the best ways for these things that get categorized as, you know, hard-nosed policy, or, you know, the actual, the policy rather than the hearts and minds, right? You're not saying that shouldn't happen, right? But what do you see when you hear stuff like that?
I hear misinformation, right? Because you're not going to talk to every Minneapolis person. You're just not. Because every Minneapolis person in the city doesn't want to talk to you. So there's that. So this idea of scale, that we're going to represent all the people, is that's false, right? And so I think that what we have is, what is the talking? Is it asking, is it a survey? Like what is this talking? Are you actually in a critical discourse with people? And I think, you know, we actually have, as part of our campaign, let's get hashtag, sorry, always gotta say hashtag let's get stupid 2020. We'll be canvassing for dreams. But the idea is more of a conversation versus, so it's, again, scale versus quality, Do I need to talk to every single person? Right? Am I running for office? Right? In that I need those numbers to justify what I want to do to the state. Like, how many numbers does the state need to say, okay, we'll do that, right? And so that's one, I think, framing that gets lost in the nuance of it. I think the objective to engage in a dialogue with people about how they think about safety and public safety is good. I think that's our work, right? We can see our work coming into play there. Just, you know, to take it back to the purpose of the labor that we do, right? But I think we still push that further, because why are we constructing this potentially self-determining approach within the constraints of a census taker, which is state-driven? And like Henri Lefebvre, right? Like, if the structures are reflecting the systems that we're attempting to, you know, whatever, dismantle, overthrow, transform, whatever, how likely, or as Audre Lorde says, the master's tools will not dismantle his thing, you know, the quote. So, you know, senior vote. But I mean, so that is like the gist of what I'm saying. Yes, applaud the effort, but the effort is being framed from a Democrats during an election season, when there's a possibility to expand the Democratic Party's power at a time where the authoritarian state is in, where those forms of operation, neoliberalism versus authoritarianism, are in conflict. What are we doing within those contradictions? And how do we problematize and polarize so that we have room to do what Julius Nyerere-Opara says, maroon abolition? That's what I'm asking us to think about.
Yeah.
You know, or that's what I'm trying to play with, you know.
Yeah,
and so that this question, who's the audience? Like, are we really looking for visibility and amplification, or are we looking for more opacity? You know what I'm saying? Like, and, or are we doing both and? And I would argue we need to be doing both and. But it is our movement in this moment. We have an opportunity, because hashtag something like reparations, to actually seed more of the alternatives that we're discussing. And those alternatives look to me far more nomadic, far more transitory than the institutional approaches that are coming out of this idea of the hyperlocal, right? In a time when the climate is shifting us all over the place, right? The economy is shifting us all over the place. For us to go with hyperlocal strategies only, I think leaves us leaves us hella vulnerable when we start getting dislocated and being moved. Do you see what I'm saying? Am I getting too abstract?
Yeah. No. I think there's 17 places I want to go with that. I mean, we, you know, talking about what maroon abolitionism means, talking about representation. I think though where I want to pull us, because I get to choose at least what I ask you, is to go back to this thing about, you know, canvassing for dreams. I mean, I saw one response, at least in the chat. I mean, first of all, that idea of canvassing for dreams is, you know, it's beautiful, and I actually can't tell you why I think that, right? But it's like, that's a reaction I had, and I think I saw some other people on this, and actually that's what I want to pursue, right? Is like, you know, one of the things I've really learned from you is about how to make demands, you know, and how to think really carefully about that. And I'll just very, very briefly say, I think one of my favorite stories you've ever told me, when I was a young whatever, is you were relaying a story about being at a Mumia march in Philadelphia I guess in the late 90s, right? And I'm going to butcher it, so I'll be quick and then you can tell it. But basically, people are going around and like, what do we want? Free Mumia. When do we want it now? Or whatever, right? And very, everybody knew the lines, right? And then you somehow got in the middle of the crowd and you basically were like, what else do you want? And dead silence, right? And I think the way you told me that story, the purpose, I think, right, was to talk about how uncomfortable we were, right? Uncomfortable people are in general, how out of touch we are with our demands, with our dreams, with our desires, right? So I want to hear you talk about that. And I think in some ways specifically, I want to hear if it comes to you, like, how do you know you feel like you've landed on a good demand? How do you, what are moments when you've noticed that maybe the demand and the dream are closer together, than at some points? Like, what is that? How do we identify that in ourselves, in our movements, in our moments in history? What are the practices you do, so that if you're not just like, other than just being somebody who likes to yell things in the street, right? Like, how do we shift that?
Ask me the question again, Ari. Ask me the question again.
How do you know when you've made a good demand? What are the signs of a good demand? Is there any through line? What even is that?
Whoa. Okay, so have we made any good, wait, okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so who is the demand to, right? So I would argue any demand we've made to the state ain't a good demand. It's just, it's enough to get us through. Fair to middling, as the old people say, right? Like, oh, no slavery. Oh, damn, prisons. Oh, like our demand, as long as we continue to make demands of the state, we're coming up against a wall. So what makes a good demand? So I want to just problematize that. But to answer, I think, your larger question, I think does the ask have with it a musicality that resonates with your people, right? And will it push us further to will it provide us with openings to make the next move? Not necessarily the next demand, but the next move. So for example, I have a dream. Anything that says dream, smile, and laugh makes people happy, right? That's why you like that word, because because it gives the impression of it is a moving space, right? It's a space of warmth. So when you have these visionary asks, right, you're constructing, you're asking your people to reach beyond what you're telling them. When you say, so a lot of what the state tells us to do is to sharpen our demand, right? And to be very specific about what we're asking for, which creates siloed, issue-oriented organizing as opposed to intersectional visionary organizing, right? So if I look at the ecosystem of anti-Black violence, right, I'm going to have to incorporate healthcare, housing, planning and design, law and order, culture, and whatever, just the range, climate I'm gonna have to incorporate those ideas because all those things impact me as a poor Black woman artist living in New Orleans at 61 years old. I cannot just focus on one particular demand. And you can look at that with even this question around police violence, right? So, like even this question of stay home, right? Feminists have been talking about this. Home ain't safe, right? So we're talking about for everyone, right? Excuse me. Home is not a safer space for everyone, not just because of internal violences from partners, etc., but also police come in your house if you Black and kill you. Like, so like this piece we're working on, Stay Woke, right? Is like so much about what does it mean, and this is what I'm talking about in problematizing the Zoom. What does it mean to not have safer space when we're talking about, you know, how we're living in any kind of an environment, rural or urban, right? So how do you just pull apart an issue? You have to intersect those things, right? So does the demand have with it a musicality that allows us to do that kind of jazz? Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges of us, right? Because the state's not gonna pick it up because oh, it's just too much. Like they can't possibly cover us. What happened to Corona coverage? Now we're all about the police, right? Now what's next? What happened to Corona? Right? So like the one story, I've been counting news stories on NPR and how the top news is separated around the 3 areas of priority in the news, right? So like what makes, if you have women dying all day, every day from all forms of patriarchal violence, why does the media amplify the call for police reform and not the call to reform patriarchy outside of Me Too? That check, we're done with that. Now we're on to the police, the men and the police. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And then I want to go further to say that that mindset then constructs something for all of us where we document someone murdering someone. What the fuck? And I don't know if I would have made the same, I'm not saying I wouldn't have made the same choices, but how is it we have a video of watching someone being murdered versus the people who were watching and videoing, wrestling the cop to the ground and getting him off of there, of George Floyd? This raises questions around how we see ourselves interrupting harm. So now we have a whole campaign that's a reaction to the harm as opposed to us being self-determining and doing it ourselves. So that's the one way I would problematize this call for hashtag whatever. If it is relying upon our gatekeepers to manifest it, it is likely not to yield the kind of vision that we're hoping to attain. And so we know that. So how are we utilizing this moment to lay out strategies so that 50 years from now we move it another place? Like going back to the Mumia stuff, right? In '92, we said, okay, we need to make Mumia Abu-Jamal's name a household word. We were able to do that to a certain degree in Philadelphia, New York, and DC very easily, and San Francisco, I would say, very easily, right? Same, say with CR, right? Critical resistance. We said we want to make abolition like, we didn't say household word, but it's the same idea like that. It is part of the cultural zeitgeist. So we've done these kind of paradigm shifts, right, where people are using this language, but we need to keep we still have to keep pushing it into this critical abolitionist language, this critical question of, now that we have the amplification and the visibility of the household name, we're talking about racism, right? You know, 400, 500 years later, we're talking about racism again, but we're not talking about race, right? So we haven't even gotten to the point where we're even talking about race. We're only talking about racism as a household term. Come on. You know, so even talking about anti-Black violence, I'm in that contradiction of amplifying what the state has named in a way to actually organize people to stop the anti-Black violence. I don't think that's effective. Nor is it effective to be like, oh, fuck it, we're not gonna talk about race, period. Also not an option. So how are we problematizing these like, common sense, these assumptions that we're making, that we go into making? our organizing is based on assumptions that we're not critically deconstructing. And so I think that's a point for us to go in this future, in this next steps.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to actually try to do a little bit of that in the moment, because, you know, I think something that I've been reading on Twitter is, and also, you know, talking to people who've been doing abolitionist organizing for a while, right, is that I think there's at least a legitimate, right, analysis of what's happening right now, is that actually people aren't asking, right, more so than normal. Actually, defund the police is closer to saying to the state, get the F out, right, than saying, come fix this problem in a more efficient way, right? And so I think I want to, like, let's go through the exercise, right? Like, so that's where I'm coming from, right? Like, I'm super excited. I feel so validated. I feel so, you know, proud of us or whatever, right? That, like, this demand, right, that to me feels like it is accomplished, like that it is the product of an earlier round of critical thinking, right? And it is the best I can imagine around saying to the state, go the F away instead of come help us better, right? So go. Like, how do we break down defund the police, defund the NYPD as a demand? What do we, you know, how do we conjure with that right now?
I think, like, okay, fine, yes, right on. Like, and here's some work for us, right? So as we're saying defund the police, what are we making in terms of safety for our communities, or where the people who will go once the police, you know, let's pretend like, you know, okay, I hate these games of abolition imagination. Like, what will the world look like without prisons? I'm like, black and gravelly. I don't know. I'm a surrealist. I don't know. It looks like a lot of shit is on the ground and it's dark. It's like I have no vision. So I do know this, right? I do know that if the police are defunded, other things will be in place to maintain the idea of law and order. So I think the place to go with that demand is to the what if, right? What if this demand gets met? What is the next move that the state is going to take? And how are we there first, right? So are social services going to set up new policing practices, right? Are social workers going to be walking around as like citizens police? Like, what's going to happen if we are asking the state to defund, to take the police away, right? What's going to happen after that city council is no longer in place, right? What lessons will we learn from how they're organizing, and how is that being translated? I mean, sorry, not translated, but transferred across our movement. So I think there's places that we want to dive in, because I'm not saying we don't make the demand, and I'm not, you know, this idea of non-reformist reform. I'm not saying we don't make the demand, but I think we don't rest on the idea that the state is going to provide us with an end to anti-Black violence, because we haven't asked what its investment is. Are we that powerful economically, politically, and militarily, right, real talk, that the state, which drops bombs on whole countries, are going to listen to us saying, stop killing us? Now, is that because white people are asking that question, and white people feel that they have more sway with the white industrial, with white structures? That I would encourage you to think about how white people are also harmed by the state. So, like, what is it that makes us think that these demands will get met without recourse? And I'm not saying we do think that. I mean, I think hopefully we do think that these demands, if met, will be met from multiple, will also that these ideas and these demands have multiple opponents, not just the right wing, right? Not just the Trumpites, but also the middle class, also the Black middle class, also, and what is their power, right? And in looking at that, doing that math, then we think about what interest then do they have in defunding the police, and how are we utilizing those interests to actually push us into abolition? So I think,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Kai. I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
No? Cool. Stein, can we go a little bit farther? I'm gonna ask a couple more because I think, and this is not like the first time I think I've landed here in a conversation with you, and I think or this particular thing, which is I hear you saying both and, right, about the type of work that needs to get done, right? Like I don't hear you, I think you said explicitly in this conversation, right? Like it's not about not bothering to defund the police, right? And I think I know in my history with you, right? Like you have like made some badass spreadsheets, you know, like you have done some like, you know, like what you were just talking about it's not just the Trumpites, right? It's also the liberals, right? There's a way that I think that work has to happen through art, through conversations, through relationships. And there's a way that work has to happen through power mapping, right? And being like, which city council member, which donor, right? Which media outlet is, you know, So I guess what I often really, I think, get a lot from talking to you is, you know, a lot of us are going to dive right back into spreadsheets after this conversation because it's our job or it's our role, right? That we've either chosen or been assigned to, right? Either because of ways in which we have power or ways in which we don't, you know? And so I think, I guess I just want you to talk about what is in that sort of spirit of both and, right? How do the people who are doing that work that you're not doing right now, right? How do you want them to do it? How do you want us to shift how we do it? How can we put a little more absurdity into our spreadsheets or our donor pit? You know, like how do you want that both and to shift?
Yeah, and I don't know, like for real, like, and I am doing that work. The work I'm doing is saying, hey, why don't you do that? You know, because actually what will make it happen is when the group that has the autonomy to bring that frame into their work, designs their work in a way that makes sense, that does that kind of interruption. And I think there's this question around what is your positionality, right? Like I said, like I'm making a choice about the work I do right now. I didn't do this work, 10 years ago, whatever. But I like this position. I like this position of, I am not, I saw the video, like last week of George Floyd. And then, I hate the count of Black death. Like ask any old person, nobody likes that shit. Say their name and that list just makes me crazy. And that's, what it should do, right? It should hurt. But I also have to practice wellness. And so for me, I remove myself from those that kind of presented roll call of Black death, right, in that way, right? But I watched this video last week because, I don't know, I thought I could handle it. And no, I didn't handle it well at all. I was like, oh, now I get why they're mad. You know what I mean? Because I hadn't really been so, I don't do Instagram, I don't do Facebook, I don't have TV. I get my news from basically two sources, and you can be critical of that: New York Times and NPR, which is New York Times, right? And then I'm on some global listservs, so there's Al Jazeera and others that I'm getting information from. But for the most part, I'm kind of in this cave, right? This safer house that I'm trying to make here. And then from that position, because that's the position for my health, for mostly my mental health, real talk. 2014 messed me up a little bit after Trayvon, because I thought that the demands of Black Lives Matter and the ways that we were going about engaging were a big mistake. And I was really panicked. I was panicked by the lack of organization. I was panicked by a lot of stuff. And I was like, okay, I have to engage my comrades. So I had meetings with a lot of the folks who are part of Movement for Black Lives, and I asked about accountability. And I have been in those conversations since about 2016. And I felt like, okay, how do I do that Ella Baker thing, right? Like sit in these conversations, be critical as necessary, be encouraging as necessary, offer resources that I have, information I have, and is that enough for me to get up in the morning? Yes, it is. So knowing my point of power at this point, which is about design and creating of new ideas that I've been talking about, like not new, but like trying out these ideas that I've been talking about, is a position of power for me. So I'm not going back to, so as I'm on this call, I'm still doing that work, right? So the spreadsheets that I do make, lots of charts, are not separated from the work that I'm doing. It's not 9 to 5 kind of work, even though the structures might be established as such. And so I would encourage people to do the level of thinking around the absurdities of what does it mean when we choose our gatekeepers, right? What does that mean for us? Where does that position us in 5 years, in 10 years, in 6 months? What is the view that includes not just one particular sector, which is, say, carcerality, but also food, right? Also labor. You know, there's a sanitation strike going on here, and a storm, because it's New Orleans. So there's all the things happening simultaneously. And how we don't get the privilege of pulling out. Also, there's bad drugs on the corner. So we don't get the privilege here of pulling out, right? That work has to fold into itself. And I would argue that when we start to think like that and work like that, we're actually working from a more abolitionist frame. We're doing more abolitionist organizing because that work is abundant as opposed to scarce and focused around very individualized strategies. There may be tasks, but those tasks are connected to larger work. And like looking at how those work together and where to pivot, I think is what our movement is asking us to do at this time in the late 21st century, coming out of a global pandemic, right? Public health pandemic, because now we're looking at a global economic pandemic and a global climate pandemic, right? And now with more of the, now we're also looking at a global carceral pandemic, right? And so we understand that from the work that y'all are doing in terms of Palestine, the work that's going on in different parts of Africa, and throughout the world. We're understanding where we're positioned, and I'm encouraging us to use that maroon abolitionist model, that networking model that we have of sharing information, of sharing ideas and knowledges, right? And concretizing that as part of a historic record, not necessarily looking for, not needing to have the victory. Because in this work, if you need to have the victory, you're liable to settle for very small rewards. It's just we take it and we move on. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's the work to put into what you do after this call is over. Like keeping those ideas afloat. Like I said, I want to share like some stuff we've been reading and studying. I think just that idea of collectivist knowledge building, thinking around this idea of what is a nomadic organizing model, what is maroon abolition, and who has to work like that, right? I would say trans communities who are out and not institutionalized have to work with that model. I would say immigrants have to work with that model. Former prisoners and prisoners have to work with that model. Artists and people who are unemployed or rely upon underground labor economies have to work with that model. We don't really have a choice. Nobody's hiring me. That's really real. And as I age, what is pension? What does that look like? So we really have to be creative in what this part of our movement is doing, and not being so concerned about some parts of our movement that this kind of elusive community that we don't even really necessarily have relationships with. You know what I'm saying? Communities that are demanding police. And we're leaving our movement communities like, yeah, we'll get there. So there's this kind of, how are we triaging the work that we're doing? Awesome. I don't know, I'm that's just a few things, a few thoughts.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. We're gonna take a breath and a pause. We're gonna shift, actually, that's a better way to say it. You brought another musical piece.
Yay.
Jay, can you introduce it, Kai, and then can we get that on, and then we'll move to the last section of this?
Okay, this piece is called Remembrance, and again, this is also from the same album, Celebrations and Solitudes. And this album is dedicated to, which is interesting, and we can deconstruct that, our brothers or our Black men. So, that's interesting. So, but I also think of it as a political education piece and in ways that we as a study group have been thinking about study. So this one is called Remembrance. Okay, Jay, drop
it. We remember our brother, Emil Gabral, murdered January 20th, 1973 by Portuguese agents. Warrior heart, you left us a courageous life, a beautiful memory, a liberated territory. Our struggle continues in your guiding spirit. Our armed struggle for the complete freedom of our people. Rest in peace, our brother, until we meet again. Long live the liberation movements. Long live our warrior hearts.
Nice, Jay. You want to go on the road with us? My name is DJ Pharaoh Atlas, and I appreciate you all. I wanted to close with that because through it all, this is a continuum. We are always in the struggle. So I appreciate your work. Thank you all for inviting me to talk and to listen. So do we have time to hear comments, or I'm just gonna have to look at them? Yeah, no, we do.
Here's what we're gonna do. It would be wonderful if people could start putting some questions and comments in the chat. But in the meantime, or as we do that, we're gonna raise some money. So my understanding is, I have a couple understandings. One is that this is a regular agreement and part of these Conversations with Movement Elders series, is that we support the person who's here. So Kai's going to talk about Gallery of the Streets just for a minute, if you would, Kai, which is the project that you've chosen for us to try to support. And you know, I used to work as a fundraiser. I've worked with a lot of you raising money. And so I think let's just do it. Let's just be super direct, right? And I think the things to say are like consistently on these calls, we've been able to raise about $1,000 or $1,500. Let's do that. My understanding is we do that by putting numbers in the chat. Is that right, Morgan and Elena and Jay? And that you three or one of you three somehow collect that, and that will happen. And, you know, I think the thing I just want to say about it, I think, is, well, two things. One is that this conversation has been wonderful, and that giving is a way to keep these conversations going. And, you know, the other thing is that, you know, something that you and I have talked about a lot, Kai, right, is like, you know, again, as somebody who I think really leads with the value of analysis, right, that, like, it's a hustle, you know, and, like, one of the things that's happening here is we're getting educated, we're getting analysis, and you can either share it with us or you can share it with some fluke, you know, some funder, you know, either we get it or George Soros's staffer gets it, you know, and I would rather we get it, to be totally honest. So I really appreciate Laura and Elena and Morgan. See, I'm going to do some of the performative measures of an official pitch, but I know you guys don't need it. Una, Sarah, let's keep it going. And can you just talk to us like the elevator-ish version of what's going on?
You know, I can't say my name in the pitch thing.
It's not, I'll handle the money part. You just say what you're doing.
Well, so okay, so we got a grant, right? Because hashtag Black Lives Matter. You know, so like some hashtag, some like reparations. So we just got resourced in a lovely way, to do this project, yeah. And so we were going to do it anyway, but it's just really helpful to get the support. And now I'm working with 25 artists, and we're producing this circus, this political circus. And we're going to go on some kind of tour beginning in Black August. We're going to do a soft kind of opening in July, 4th of July. And the idea, again, is hashtag Let's Get Stupid 2020. And so the series of performances, installations, and propaganda interventions that we'll be doing in a Black counterpublic. So one of the things we're doing is, you know, this idea of canvassing for dreams. We've been working with Southerners on New Ground, who have also supported us. So we're going to be working around the South, doing this canvassing for dreams with a team of artists and activists who we're calling the Fugitive Unemployment, who are working with the Fugitive Unemployment Agency. And so as fugitive unemployed people, they'll be doing some canvassing in our communities, asking folks like, so what's your dream, that sort of thing. And all this, we're hoping to land in October, the last weekend of October into Election Day in early November. And we're holding a Hush Harbor off the grid. We're looking at this place in Alabama that is willing to host us, where we're going to be engaging in a practice of what we're saying is a gachacha, following this idea of gachacha courts, where we're looking at, which means from the grass. And again, I can send you some of these resources, but really looking at what does it mean to problem solve and be in our own way of governance. So we're developing it now. We've been working on this since 2016 in different versions, and we were ready to go, and then COVID hit. And we lost one of our artists, died during COVID, and, you know, I haven't left the house since March, you know, and so, and we're nationally based, so we've been dealing with Zoom anyway. We don't see Zoom as a counterpublic. I mean, the computer as a counterpublic. So we do want to get in the streets in our communities. And so now we're trying to figure out how that looks and how we can be safe with it as we canvas for dreams. So that, that's what we're doing. You can check us out online. At galleryofthestreets.org. We also have a website for Breach, and if people are interested in supporting the work, I would love to talk to you, because we definitely need people in different locations around the country to host things like house parties, because prisoner number 5 needs to go to cocktail parties to help, prepare them for circus tricks and things like that. So we can talk further if you're interested. We're more interested, not more, but we really want the active participation of our people in addition to the funding. But, the people resource is really the dynamism of our work, right? So we do a lot of found object stuff. So, the people are what makes it pop. So that's my pitch. Get involved. We would love to work with you and collaborate with JVP. We collaborate with organizations, so that is really the more desired place, I think, for us, is what does collaboration look like. So that's that. I don't know if that's pitchy enough. Also, I guess I'm tired of talking about this thing. I'm so sick of this opera. I'm sick of our work.
Totally. Let me just chime in here. We are at 1418. So thank you all. And let's 1481. Sorry, I read that wrong. And let's get to 1500. That's like a nice round, rational, even, simple, clean number, contrary to everything we've been talking about this whole hour. But let's do that. Let's get another $19 or $900, whatever we can do.
Can people talk while they give money so we can hear people's ideas and I don't keep talking?
Yeah, do you want some vocal questions on a 78-person Zoom? That is really interrupting the Zoom protocols, I believe. That is a big no-no.
Oh my God, with Gallery of Streets, now mind you, it's only 25 of us, but we definitely have a no mute group, right? Because we need that call and response happening. So, I mean, rule for what it's worth, but we try to ask people, like, unmute so we can hear you breathe, So, yes, if people can just ask questions or talk or whatever, I would love that. I would love to hear what people think.
That is really throwing down the gauntlet. I think that is where dreams and demands collide.
It's
crazy. We could try it, right?
Cacophony of sound.
Can we try that? I don't personally have the power to make that happen, but I think one of you.
What I was saying is that, like, it sounds like this is what happens when there could be some like social media.
So would you mind going ahead muting us?
And having rabbis.
Oh, is that person? All right. We're going to try that again. Or maybe we're not.
It couldn't be that discord and desperate even a half a second. Oh, Lord, no. Mute them.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We could try that again. We could put some questions in the chat. I do have a question about like what materials you're working with. And then you could take that like literally artistically, like what is the thing behind you made out of, or otherwise? Maybe we can start there.
Did somebody ask that question?
Somebody did ask that question, but also, I don't know why I'm just filling time while people are on mute. I just want to hear the primal collective scream is coming.
It's made with coffee beans. Can y'all see it? It's a ceiling to floor collage, wall to wall, and it's made with I don't think the lighting's so good, but it's made with materials that reflect Black fungibility. So there's pennies, upside down pennies, there's cotton, there's roses, there's seeds that I've picked up. There's cotton. There's all this stuff that I've picked up, and I'm painting it and shaping it and making it. This whole room is going to be transformed into this safer space, hopefully by September or October. So it's going to be an open studio space, and we're going to be doing a live radio show out of here that, you know, like kind of model, again, it's called Stay Woke, and it's for Breonna Taylor, this whole list of people who've gotten killed in their beds from around the world. And so the idea is to get people to take 24 hours and stay up on Zoom and kind of watch over each other. And so this house will be kind of the safer house headquarters. So I'm really wanting to have a political conversation about home and what home means. So this is my studio. So each room is shotgun, and each room will be transformed into another kind of environment and space. So yeah, this is my COVID piece, but I actually have been working on this, building it for a year. So it's a lot of work, all day, every day.
Are we gonna get off mute? We can get off mute or not. I have a question. I've heard you say, and I think that this might be, we have time for one or two more, but I've heard you say safer space a bunch today. And, you know, I think a certain tendency of abolitionists, to which you at least at one point belonged, thought that it was time to move beyond safety, right? That like that word actually was not helpful. What does safer mean?
I miss that meeting when we decided? Where are the notes? When did we decide that? Like, I don't know. But I agree. Maybe I was at that meeting. I mean, this idea of safer is bullshit, right? And so, like, but also, there's also, we're not slaves, right? Like, so there's also some growth, right? But again, how do we problematize how we are? So this idea of safer space. My space is safer, understanding that I'm renting, understanding that I live in New Orleans, which is basically like camping outside, understanding that at any moment, this space can be taken from me, and or I am unsafe in the space that I'm in, where I'm intimate. And so I want to really think about this question of, there's a safety to it because my intimacy happens here, but there's also, it is not safe. It's safer than if I was living on the streets. I saw the other day, went to a grocery store, like one of the few times I've gone out the house. And we drove, anybody who knows New Orleans, will understand this topography. There's the Claiborne Bridge, and underneath the Claiborne Bridge is where a lot of homeless people live and gather. And the other day I saw a man laying on a bed, not a mattress on the ground. It was a bed, and he had sheets, a fitted sheet and a flat sheet. And he was laying on the bed underneath the bridge with sheets. And I was like, wow, he is furnishing the outside space. So, I mean, I'm going back, I've been trying to plan to go back and take him some sheets and pillows and shit, and engage him around the idea of this Black absurdity of making home wherever you are. But again, how comparatively his space is, I would say, more contentious than my space, right? But they're both contentious spaces. So the question of safer, I think, is a legitimate question when you're engaging racial capitalism and heteronormativity and environmental destruction, right, along with white supremacy, right? Safer is safer. Does that make sense? Is that what y'all was talking about?
Totally.
Okay, see, I get it. I don't have to go to every meeting. I get it in here. Okay, I'm being silly. Ask more questions so I can go now.
We got one. Let's get some people off mute. Let's try this unmuting thing again. Some, one of you, a dozen of you, press the button and start talking.
Hello.
I have a question.
Well, that's all I have to say.
Let's get the question. Whoever said they have a question. Keep
I have a question.
asking it.
My name's Eitan. I'm wondering, when you say that a demand should have musicality to your people, who do you think those people are? Who are you talking about? And how do you figure out who your people are?
I think they're the people who you're in dialogue with. You know their language. So there's no fixed, that's what I'm saying about this question of autonomy. So the people who talk with me around something like a Jane Cortez, that language of Black absurdity and avant-gardism are really different potentially with my neighbors or even my exes. So I will have to kind of sometimes adjust my tongue, because if you think about the experience of the nomad, the immigrant, or the refugee, we are always in a process of adjusting a tongue and expanding our language, right? And so there's also the question of musicality at which point, right? So your language changes. You see what I'm saying? Maybe now you're talking to one community, and 30 years from now, you're speaking differently. Your music is different. So it's always paying attention. You have to pay attention to how your words land. I have had the fortune of going around the world rather, and having people in Suriname be like, Black Power, sister, like a couple years ago, And I'm like, damn, what gave me away? Is it the fro? What's doing it? But I know in friggin' Vegas, a cat is like Black Power. So I'm like, okay, I'm speaking a language of Black Power. I don't necessarily even have to say anything. It's sometimes just how I'm showing up. And so people align themselves with me, and other people are repelled by me also. There's that. So you gotta nuance that, right? Code switching, as they say. You get me?
Yeah, so there's a certain kind of you speak and then you see who hears the music.
And thinking you're making music, even how you walk into a space, your pacing, how much space you take, what you're wearing at that particular time, how you're giving eye contact, what your body is doing. You're in a dialogue from the moment you show up. So how do you ride that as you would as a musical piece, right? Is there a crescendo here? Do I get quiet there? How am I working in that? Now this is for people who think musically. If you don't think musically, that metaphor doesn't work for you. Let's try tarot cards.
How quickly can you do a tarot card, Kai? We had talked about doing that. It is 5:30. We got to let people go. Thank you. I think that's a perfect place to end, actually. I think we should just call it here. I think thinking metaphorically, I think one that works for you and maybe some of us some of the time, and some of us other times. That's beautiful. Is there anything else you wanna close it out with?
No, just I guess there's a question right now. Highlander is asking the question of what is your recipe for culture? And I would say, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I messed up those words, but I would say that, it is there are multiple recipes. And why would you stick with one when you can work with a map? Why would you stick with one when you can work with an atlas? Where you can work with the space? Why do we limit the ways we think and the ways we move to such a sliver of it, of what is ahead of us. So I think just thinking in plurality, thinking in plurals, thinking in abundance is an abolitionist organizing approach. And if we're doing that, as we move and experience this work over the years and the decades, you will remember these calls, these conversations, and they will work for you or not. But you will recall them because you're engaging them. And I think that if we don't do nothing else, that I feel is check. I can die like, okay, well, I did that. You know?
Mm.
So that might be a downer. But I feel good. Thanks, y'all. I'm getting paid now. Do I get to read the comments and whatnot that people are sending?
Will you three figure out a way to save them? Okay.
I really
you.
Appreciate the fundraising piece of this.
Yeah, and maybe Morgan, would you actually mind putting the link in one more time? Because I know otherwise it's going to be a boatload of work to hustle up all these gifts. Kai, thank you. This is going to go up on the jvp.org/movement elders or something like that website, along with a bunch of others. So maybe also at some point we can chat about what some of your contemporaries are saying too. And is there another one we should be announcing, or a next step, or No, everybody just go paint or make music in whatever literal or metaphorical way, or work on a spreadsheet in whatever way you're going to.
Thank you,
right.
Ari. Let's check in.
Sounds good.
Hi, Morgan. I love you.
Thank you all for your amazing work. It's so good to